Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. I am excited to talk with you about monitoring student progress. We are actually going to discuss the second phase of monitoring student progress, which is what we call keeping students challenged. There are two different phases within this section of teacher responsibilities. And they actually, the keeping students challenged over time is where you spend the vast majority of your time while using Read Naturally Live. What we do at the beginning of the school year is a big heavy lift to get a program off the ground, right? There's lots of tech things that you need to do with adding students, placing students, training students, all those kinds of things. But once it's up and running, then we're just monitoring student performance and adjusting as needed. So the first phase of that is what you see in this first bullet point, which is check the student's initial placement after 3 stories. And again, that happens pretty early on in the school year. So by now, late October, most of your students probably have passed more than 3 stories. So you're in a phase that we call keeping students challenged over time. Now, just like in checking initial placement, keeping students challenged over time has a support system built in called Data Mentor. So Data Mentor provides suggestions to the teacher on whether or not the student should have a higher or lower level, a higher or lower goal. Okay, and Data Mentor is available at the final pass review work page, and I'll show you some screenshots of that. It's also available at any time through the teacher menu from the student module, and I'll also show you some screenshots of where that is located in case you're unfamiliar. But what I want you to, the note I want you, or the word I want you to realize is that Data Mentor provides a suggestion. It doesn't make the suggestion, nor does it provide a requirement or a mandate. It's a suggestion. Data Mentor uses AI. It has algorithms in the background based on how the student performs while working in the program. But it does not know anywhere near as much as you do about your students. And so you need to trust your teacher instincts, and sometimes you will agree with it and sometimes you won't. And this session is going to really help you be confident in when you agree and when you disagree. If you're brand new to Read Naturally Live, you may lean on Data Mentor a little more than if you've used it for years, right? Because you're maybe a little more confident with your knowledge of when to make those changes. Regardless of how much experience you have, it is helpful to have a suggestion appear now and again so that you are reminded to make sure they're in the right spot. Um, and for those who are new, it is very helpful and certainly a confidence builder when you're making those changes. The place that we go to look for data on students is a report that we call the Students at a Glance report. It looks like this, and I want to draw your attention to a few things. The first section down here is just showing you the student's grade, their name, and who their teacher is. Then we have all the data from the students, including this first section, which is just letting you know what level they're at, when they started, and how many stories they've passed. Okay, so just kind of general data, not necessarily performance data, just information about where they're at. The next sections, the gray and white section, the first one is gray, that's fluency, and then we have comprehension. I want you to notice that each of these columns contains 2 numbers that are separated by a forward slash. This is not a fraction. In this cold timing column, it's not 41/48. What it's telling us is that the average cold timing after the first 3 was 41 words correct per minute. The average cold timing score after the most recent 3 or the last 3 was 48 words correct per minute. So if you take a look at this heading that's written vertically, you'll notice in the parentheses under the cold timing heading, it says first 3 forward slash last 3. So the first 3 they completed in that level and the most recent 3 they completed in that level. So what you're doing when you're keeping students challenged is you're taking a look at where they started and where they are now. And you're asking yourself, are they ready for more of a challenge? Have they made progress in enough areas for me to think that they can handle something more challenging? The indicators for increasing a challenge is are listed here. We want the student to meet 2 or more of these indicators in order for us to think that a change should be made. The average cold timing score improving, the average hot timing score improving, and the average quiz score improving are indicators that the student is making progress and can handle more of a challenge. The average hot timing score being 10 or more words above the goal. So think about that for a minute. Hot timing, we say hot timing. We also say pass timing. That final timing when they read for you, hot, pass, or final, whichever word you use is the same. We want the difference between their average final timing score and their goal. If it's a double-digit difference, if it's 10 or more, that's an indication to you they can handle more of a challenge. That's quite a bit away from where their goal is, so they maybe can handle something that is more challenging. We also want to take a look at how many times they've practiced. If you're new to Read Naturally Live, you may not realize that students are on the practice step until they reach their story goal independently on the practice step. So if your student practices 7 times in September and October, in order to reach their goal, it means they had to practice 7 times to meet that goal. If now let's say in November, you notice that, oh, now they're only having to practice 5 times. That means that in fewer practices, they're able to meet the same goal. So sometimes number of practices will go down. The hot timing score, we won't see improvement because the practices are going down. So those two are connected in that way. And then finally, this is not in any report, but that is that student behavior changes. If your student loved this program when they started using it at the start of the year and they're not quite as into it anymore, likely they need more of a challenge. We want to always be challenging our students as much as possible, right? I always think of it as it's a balancing act because we know intuitively that our students will make the most progress if they are challenged. We also know that if they get to the point of frustration, we could lose some of them, especially those that have struggled for a long time. So we need them to be able to reach their goal. We need them to be able to answer their comprehension questions, but we need them to have to work hard to do those things, right? And so that is the balancing act that we are playing throughout the rest of the school year, and certainly whenever we're monitoring student performance. So I'm going to back up one moment. All of these things on this slide, these indicators for increasing a challenge, this is our written format. Here is a picture format. I want you to notice you don't even have to run the Students at a Glance report for you to be able to tell that the first 3 stories cold timing score down here on the left, we're getting below 60, are lower than the most recent 3, which are getting close to 70, right? So we can see there's progress there without running an official report, without making the exact calculation. I can tell that the students' cold timing scores are getting better. Okay. I can also tell their past timing scores are getting better. They're under 90 or right at 90, and now here they're getting close to 100. If I draw a line where their goal is, I can very easily see that the average hot timing score is just a little bit above their goal in the first 3, and now they are significantly above their goal. The quiz, I can also tell just by looking at, if I look at these first 3 stories, the student missed 4 questions in the first 3 stories. But in the most recent 3 stories, the student has only missed 1. Okay, so we're seeing progress there. And then finally, the number of practices going down is that other indicator. Now, oftentimes, we are deciding what to do. We'll make the decision that yes, we do need to make a change, but what is it that we do? First off, we tend to only increase one thing at a time. So if we raise a level, we leave the goal the same. If we raise a goal, we tend to leave the level the same. There's always exceptions, but that is a good general guideline. After 12 stories, we can raise a level or a goal because we have another set of 12 stories, right? There's 24 nonfiction stories in each level. They're broken up into 2 sets of 12. If your student gets to 24 stories, the computer will move them up to the next level because they're out of stories. But there is nothing magical about 12 or 24. Students will move up after 7, after 11, after 14, after any number in between, okay? But the 12 and 24 are a natural reminder to teachers. Because we break our stories up into 2 sets of 12, your students will get a brand new set of 12 stories after they've passed that first set. And it's kind of a natural reminder to you that, oh, if I haven't looked recently, I best look and see if they can handle something harder, okay? And then the most important thing to consider really is that what is the student's long-term fluency benchmark goal? Okay, so in order for us to talk about their long-term fluency benchmark goal, we have to agree on a definition. It's really hard to talk about things unless we define them the same way. So what is long-term fluency benchmark goal? Every student's long-term fluency benchmark goal is to read unpracticed, grade level passages at, near, or above the 50th percentile on national norms. So let's give that in an example form. I tend to understand a little better when I do that. It means that I will need my third grade students to read a third grade passage. So a grade level passage, third grader, third grade passage, unpracticed. The first time my third grader reads a third grade passage, I want them to be around the 50th percentile. Okay, unpracticed grade level around the 50th percentile. In the fall, back in maybe you did your assessments in August or September, that was how you determined which students are going to use this intervention, right? Those students who are 10 or more below the 50th percentile, or whatever your individual district might have for the guidelines, those students were flagged as needing intervention. So their long-term goal is not to get where we want them in the fall, but rather to get to the 50th percentile on grade level material for the spring norms. Okay, this is every student's long-term fluency goal, is to read grade level material around the 50th percentile the first time. So if you have a fifth grader who reads at a fourth grade level, this is a goal, not only their long-term goal, it is likely a goal that they will be able to meet this school year, right? If you have an eighth grader who reads at a second grade level, this is still their long-term fluency goal. They might not be able to come up 7 or 8 levels in one school year, but it is still important to keep in mind, what is their goal? What level should they be reading at? What pace should they be able to read at? And so those are things we always want to keep in mind, kind of regardless of how far below our student or the individual student is. All right, so we're going to take a look at Lee, and we're going to see whether or not he's made progress. Those are easy questions to answer, so I won't pause in between asking them, because you'll be able to see immediately that he has or hasn't. Then after that, we're going to ask, well, what do we do? And that's kind of a more challenging question. So let's take a look at Lee's Students at a Glance report. Lee is a third grader working in 2.5, and he's passed 12 stories. Okay, his cold timing score has absolutely improved. He started out at 41 words correct per minute. Now he's at 48. His average pass timing or hot timing score has also improved. Started out at 74, and now his hot timing score is 80. The difference between his current hot timing score of 80 and his goal is 10, right? So it's a double-digit difference between where his average hot timing score is right now, that's the second number, and his current goal. So we're already at every single one. We're already at 3 things. His quiz has gone up. His quiz was strong to begin with, and now it's even stronger, and his practices have gone down. Okay, so there's no question that Lee does need more of a challenge. He's making progress all over, and this does sometimes happen. It also happens that he's making progress in 2 or 3 of the areas, and then he would still need more of a challenge. So the question often isn't so much whether or not he needs more of a challenge. The question mostly becomes, well, what is it we do? Do we raise the level? Do we raise the goal? So we ask, how many stories has he completed? What's his long-term fluency goal? Is he closer to reading at the rate that his peers, his grade level peers are reading? Or is he closer to reading the content, the level that his peers are reading? So is the student's words correct per minute score on their cold timing closer to what their peers are able to do who are in mainstream? Or is the level that they're working on in Read Naturally Live closer to what this level that the students who are mainstream readers are reading at? Okay, so let's ask ourselves these three questions one at a time. The first one is just pulling information off the report, pretty easy. Lee has only completed 12 stories, so we can raise level or goal. We have plenty of stories to go, so we have that option. His long-term fluency benchmark goal. We have this in oral reading fluency. I've pulled out here this third grade, fall, winter, and spring. 50th percentile for third grade by the spring is 112. So that's the pace which I want him to be able to read at by the end of this school year. Which is he closer to? Well, his current cold timing score, his current unpracticed timing score is 48. His peers, we want him to be at 112. So by the end of the year, he has to more than double the pace. He is a third grader working in mid-second grade level. So he's only a half a grade level below what his peers are working in right now. He is much closer to level. Okay. This is a luxury. It is not one we have for all of our students, but this is a student who's only working a half a grade level below. What should we do then? Do we raise his level or do we raise his goal? Well, when a student is working in a Read Naturally level that's pretty close to their goal, it's a luxury because I don't have to worry about the content, about the sophistication of the vocabulary. I'm not as worried about the level because it's fairly close to what his peers are being exposed to. And that allows me the chance to focus in on his automaticity, to focus in on his pace, his accuracy, his expression, his rate, all of his fluency components, right? So in order to focus in, if I want to focus in on those things, I'm going to keep his level the same and I'm going to raise his goal. Okay? Because I don't have to be afraid of the difference in content that Lee works in compared to his peers. He's pretty close there, but he's not close when it comes to rate. So I'm going to focus in on that by raising his goal and leaving his level the same. Now, when we raise a goal, we tend to raise by 10 words at a time. We raise a level by a half year. Sometimes we raise it by a whole year, but usually by a half. And we always discuss the change with the student. And there's kind of two reasons for this. The first is obvious that it's just a fun conversation to have. When you're a teacher, you have to have all sorts of conversations that you don't want to have and that the student doesn't want to have, right? Nobody's interested in having a good percentage of the conversations we have to have during the school day. And so when you have a conversation that you want to have and the student want to wants to have, that's a luxury that's joyful. So enjoy that conversation. Every kid likes to be told that he's made so much progress that he needs a higher level or goal. Okay, but a little bit more subtle reason is that the student needs to understand and he needs to be an active participant in his progress. He needs to understand that it is up to him to become a better reader. You cannot make your students a better readers. You can spend a whole bunch of time researching programs and find one that's a good fit for your students. You can spend all weekend creating incentive programs and you can spend $100 at Target on prizes and candy bars. And all of those things will create an environment that makes it possible, which is important. But at the end of the day, you can't read for them. The only way your kids are going to get better is if they practice, if they actively read. So how hard the students work, how engaged they are, how many stories they pass each week is a direct correlation with how much progress they make. And they need to experience the fact that they are in charge of that, not you. So discussing the change with student allows them the opportunity to experience the fact that they're in charge. Data mentor suggestions appear on the final pass review work page. They appear in a moment when the student and the teacher are for sure together. And the reason we chose to put them there is so that it is a very easy and natural time to have that discussion with your student. So when you see the little red dot on the Data Mentor tab and you go take a look at it, the first thing you should say is, okay, well, the computer thinks this. What do you think? And see if the student, give the student the opportunity to be in charge of that decision. And you can have a discussion about whether or not you think it's a good idea. So Lee's new goal would be 80. You could manually make that change in read naturally live. If you didn't have a data mentor suggestion, you could make that change manually. If you did have a data mentor suggestion, you are when you're on the pass review work page. So if you take a look at the taskbar across the top, notice the red arrow in the upper right corner is pointing to the pass step. The student just passed the story and you're looking at their work. When you land on this page initially, the story details tab is highlighted, and so that's the content that's shown on the screen. Then you have information on their fluency scores and comprehension and so forth. But the final tab over here is Data Mentor. And if there's a red dot on the Data Mentor tab, it means there is a suggestion in here. There is an accept button, and if you click accept, the change will be made. When the student clicks next, they will see that they have completed those stories. They'll set a new set of stories, but in the same level, 2.5, just with the new goal of 80. His goal used to be 70, now his new goal is 80. So that accept button makes it so you don't have to manually make the change, it changes it for you automatically. Okay. This teacher button in the upper right-hand corner, this button is probably familiar to you. This button's on every single student screen. And at any point, you can click on this teacher button, log into the teacher menu, navigate to the data mentor section, and see if there's a suggestion in there. Okay, so that's another place that you can see it at any time. So if you're thinking, oh gosh, I didn't know anything about this data mentor tab and these suggestions, I don't want to wait till my student gets to the pass review work page. I want to see if there's something that can change now. That's great. When your student's logged in, you can click on this teacher menu button. You can go into that teacher menu and see if there's a suggestion. There's an accept button in there too. So if there is a suggestion, you agree with it, you can make the change right at that moment as well. Okay. So is Lee ready to exit? All right, let's take a look. When you are deciding if a student should enter an intervention, you use formal assessment data. When you are deciding if a student should exit an intervention, you use formal assessment data. Benchmark assessment data is our gold standard of fluency assessment data. Okay, so that is what we lean on for entering and exiting interventions. In the fall, Lee came in reading about 36 words correct per minute. Now, third graders in the fall of the year, 36 words correct per minute is very, very low. He's down probably around the 10th percentile when he came in the fall. He was in serious trouble. Okay, so now let's fast forward through the winter all the way to the spring. And let's pretend that it is May or June and you give them the spring assessment and he reads 85 words correct per minute. Lee has made a lot of progress. In the spring, 85 words correct per minute is closer to the 25th or 30th percentile, so he's climbing up. He's gaining. Okay, he's making more progress than his peers, so he's closing that gap. Is it enough for him to be done with intervention? Well, one thing that we also can look at is curriculum-based measurement data, which also in this case would be Read Naturally Live data. Read Naturally Live data for students who are reading at or very close to grade level is valuable. It is not as good as formal assessment data, but it is certainly more available, right? Formal assessment data only comes in 3 times a year. Curriculum-based measurement data, or your Read Naturally Live data, that comes in every week. You get new scores, updated data. And so sometimes I like to peek, right? In between these long periods, in between these assessment, it's sometimes good to see how are we doing? Are we gaining? Are we closer? Where are we at? And if your student is reading at or very close to grade level, like Lee here, remember Lee's a third grader, so in the spring he's at mid-third grade level, his cold timing scores, if the teacher's with him, his cold timing scores on grade level material is a pretty decent number. All right, so is he ready to exit? We want him at 112. His formal assessment data in the spring is 85 words correct per minute. His curriculum-based measurement data is 80. His hot timing score is 114. Lee is not ready to exit. Okay, we use these numbers to just proofs or to make some points. First off, we never look at a pass timing or a hot timing score and compare it to anything. We don't compare it to norms. There is no such thing. This is, maybe he practiced 8 times, maybe he practiced 5 times. We don't have norms for such a thing. The kids love their pass or hot timing score. It is not that meaningful to us. Okay. But we also wanted to highlight the fact that we don't want the student to be where they were supposed to be in the fall. We need them to have a score that is at the spring score. Okay, so we use cold timing scores, we use formal assessment scores, and we compare them to the spring number. Now, Lee was a really nice student for me to display, because Lee made progress in every single area. And that's lovely when that happens. And it does happen. It does not happen every single time for every single student. Big surprise, surprise, surprise. So what do you do if you have a student or a couple students who aren't making the progress that you want them to make? The first thing I want you to look at is whether or not the students are completing the steps correctly. It is the most common issue that I see, is that students do not complete the steps with fidelity. You maybe taught them to complete them with fidelity, but they are not. And so you need to make sure that they do that. The step that they do least well, or the most commonly are not completing properly, is the read along step. When your students are reading along with the audio support, it is not called listen along. It is not called story time. It is called read along. And every single step that the student does in Read Naturally Live, when they are reading out loud with their mouths. If they claim they're reading in their head, you have no idea what is actually going on in their head. Sometimes they don't either. So you need them to be moving their lips along with that audio support. So please make sure that your students are doing that step correctly. Another step that students often don't do as well as they should is, when they are on practice, clicking on words they don't know and having them read to them. It's another really powerful thing for them to do. And that's something that oftentimes students, they don't do as much as they should. So taking a look for sure at the read along step, and making sure doing it the right way. The next thing you can consider is a program adjustment. There's some steps that are good and important, but aren't quite as essential. For example, if I have my student typing a retell, maybe I decide I'm going to turn that off, because that'll give my student 5 more minutes to be in the act of reading. If my student's getting frustrated with keyboarding, I might even turn off the prediction step. Give them 2 more minutes. So now 2 and 5, I got 7 more minutes in the act of reading. If he's reading 100 words in a minute, that's 700 extra words in just one session. Okay, so making adjustments to the steps. Maybe they need to do whole story timings. Instead of just practicing the story for 1 minute every time, you can go into story options and make it be a whole story timing. You can adjust how many times they have to read along. You can adjust every single step in the program. So sometimes students need adjustments. Your student in August is going to be very different than your student in December, and again, different than your student in March and in June. So step adjustment can go on throughout the school year. The same student might have different steps adjusted at different points in the school year, and that's great. That's, means that you're tuning in to what is needed for the student at that moment. The next thing I want you to think about is classroom management. And that, again, it's kind of a twofold or two-part aspect of teaching. The first one is compliance, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's getting students to do things they don't necessarily want to do. It's part of teaching. It's probably not the reason you got into teaching. I know it is certainly not the reason I got into education. I don't like to make people do things they don't want to do. It completely goes against my grain. But when I'm teaching, I have to, right? It's part of the job. Not only do you have to get kids to do things they don't necessarily want to do, you have to be good at getting them to do things they don't want to do. And each kid's a little different that way. So mandating that they do the steps properly and making sure the environment is such that they're implementing with fidelity is something that is the teacher's responsibility. The flip side of that is kind of a more fun way to approach it, and that would be an incentive program. So keep track of things that to motivate kids. The best thing to keep track of is the number of stories students pass each week. On our website, we have a resource that's called, it's a printables. We have lots of free printable resources on our website, so go check those out. One of them is a weekly story tracker, and another one is Avery labels with all the titles of every story from every level. So you can go to the Avery label template and click print, stick your Avery label in your printer, and your students, when they pass a story, they can peel their sticker off and just stick it on a bulletin board in your classroom. Done. That's it. That's all you have to do. It's a very quick and easy implemented incentive program. And the best predictor of your students' progress is the number of stories they pass each week. Your student who passes the most stories at the end of this school year is going to be your student who made the most progress every single time. I've been working with Read Naturally for 23 years, and I can tell you that that is the case for students because they spent the most time in the act of reading, right? They were on task most often if they passed the most stories. Now, they might not be in the highest level because they might be a kid who started, lower than a lot of the other kids in your group, but they will have made the most progress. So keeping track of the number of stories passed each week for the individual student, but also do it for the whole group. In the chat box right now is your weekly story tracker. Thank you for putting that in there so that you don't have to hunt around for it. It's right there for you. And that is a really, really good thing to keep track of, not just for the individual, but for the whole group. Get some peer pressure involved. You want John to care whether or not Jane is on task, right? Because if he cares, she's maybe more likely to care than if you care. That peer pressure can be a beneficial thing if used correctly. So that is a really good thing to keep track of. You can also keep track of other things that are simple to keep track of, like 100% on the quiz the first time through, 0 errors on the pass timing. All these kinds of things are ways to make sure that students are doing the steps properly, completing the program well, and staying on task. Another thing to consider is supplementary instruction. So there's a lot of different things that can be supplementary instruction. One of them, if you have a kid who's really far below grade level and or makes a lot of errors, there may be a phonics issue there. Go into Read Naturally or go into Read Live, find our phonics assessment. We have it in printable form. We also have it in electronic form now this year. Make sure they don't have a phonics issue. Filling phonics holes, if they have some, is going to help them a lot. And so having them use Word Warm-Ups Live, which is available to anyone with a Read Live license. They can also use Word Warm-Ups Live, and filling those phonics holes can go a long way. If you have a different phonics solution that you use at your site, that's great too, but you have to fill it, whether it's with Word Warm-Ups Live or something else. If you have students with phonics issues, you need to know that, and then you need to solve that problem. You might have a student with a phonics or with a comprehension issue. In our program, we have a comprehension builder, we have a comprehension tips documents. So there's resources in there for you to support your students with their comprehension. Finally, sometimes students need a level or goal adjustment, even if it's not being suggested. I'm a runner, so my analogy with this is always running on a treadmill versus running outside. Now, I live in Minnesota, so I have to run on a treadmill more often than I want. But if I run on a treadmill, it is nowhere nearly as gratifying as running outside, because when you're running outside, you're going somewhere, right? And so students need to know they're going somewhere, especially those who have struggled for a long time. They need to see that their effort is paying off and they're getting higher levels and higher goals. And so sometimes an adjustment to one of those things can ignite some positive energy for your students to engage. Okay. Now, if you have issues with your students' progress and you're not sure what to do, we are here to help you. So please call our office. I am more than happy to talk through performance issues with your students. I cannot promise that I will solve every one of them, but I can tell you what I would do if it was my problem. And sometimes it's just helpful to talk through things. Sometimes you might come to the decision on your own or a realization on your own just by talking through it. So feel free to reach out to our office. We are happy to talk with you about things like that. Now, our final activity for today is we're going to talk about 3 students, Jeff, John, and Janelle. We're going to look at their students at a glance report, and we're going to decide whether or not they need more of a challenge and what it should be. Okay. We're also in this case going to provide you with a little information about each student that the report doesn't tell you, but that if you were that student's teacher, you would know. Okay, because that teacher information is valuable as well as the data. And then we might, for some of the students, we might change a little something about the student and see if your decision might be different, right? A student who's a first grade or third grader reading at a second grade level is very different than an eighth grader reading at a second grade level. And so your decisions might be different. All right, so again, we're looking at that students at a glance report. We're going to take a look at Jeff, John, and Janelle and make these decisions. In your handout, one thing that might be helpful as we're making these decisions in this part of the presentation, and it will also be helpful to you when you're working with your own student data, is a one-page takeaway. It's a reference for analyzing data. It includes our placement table ranges in the upper left. It includes all the levels that we have in the different series. It tells you where their goals should be based on the age of the student. And you have oral reading fluency norms for the 50th percentile for fall, winter, and spring. Okay, so this is a helpful resource for you. All right, so the note to note about Jeff that's not in his data, but that a teacher would know, is that he self-times for his cold timing. So 2 things are important about that. Number 1, if your students do their own cold timing, you will never get a data mentor suggestion. The cold timing data cannot be relied on if a teacher is not with that student. And so we are not going to make a suggestion based on unreliable data. Okay. So if a student self-times, you're going to need to make those decisions on your own without the support of that. Jeff has got a great attitude. He works really hard. So those are other things to know. And if we take a look at Jeff, we notice the star on his cold timings tells us that a teacher was not present for one or more of the cold timings. Okay. He has not made progress in cold timing. He has in past timing. His difference between his goal and his hot timing is only 7. His quiz has gone up in a significant way. He was in a place where we were a little worried about him, but now he's doing quite well. His practices have been cut in half. If he were to practice 3 more times, do you think his hot timing score would be higher than 97? You bet, right? So the difference between his hot timing, this gain would have been significantly larger had he practiced the same number of times. So Jeff definitely needs more of a challenge. He's made progress in 2 or more areas. The question is, what do we do? What we do is we take a look at how many stories he's passed. He's only passed 12. I have a question here that came up that I want to mention. How to do a students at a glance report. We're gonna maybe if Christy could in the chat box send a link to how to run that from our help page. You go to, when you're logged into the staff module, there's a reports tile. So you click on the reports tile, then you go to Read Naturally Live and you'll see students at a glance report. So in the chat box in a few minutes, you'll get a link to how to run that report. But another question came up about counting errors, and this is really important. What it says to the student, if the student has the headphones on, the teacher might not realize this, but what it says is click on the words that you don't know when they make a mistake in the cold timing. So if your student has a mistake in the cold timing, you click on that word. That is how you keep track of errors. And it is absolutely essential that you click on every word that they miss. So the big proper nouns that they miss, of course, you're going to click on those. They're not even going to be bothered that you click on those because they realize they don't know it. But they don't know that they don't know those high frequency words. And sometimes teachers say, well, I don't want them to know that they made a mistake. But that is the problem. They will never learn to read correctly if we don't tell them when they don't. One of the reasons they struggle with high frequency words for so long is we don't let them know when they make a mistake. You wouldn't interrupt a kid during an assessment, a formal assessment, you wouldn't interrupt him. But this is instruction. This is curriculum. This is a moment when you are with them. Maximize your influence on them and let them know when they make a mistake. And that by doing that, you click on the words they miss. That will tally errors, and it will also give you a list of every word they missed. Okay. So thank you for mentioning that. That's a really good thing for others to know as well. All right. So the long-term goal for Jeff is 112 words correct per minute. He's only reading 61. He's a third grader in 3.0. So he has to almost double his cold timing score. Plus, this is his timing score without you, so it's maybe a little higher than there were, or than if you were with him. But he's reading at grade level, so he's much closer to level. So just like Lee, I would want to raise his goal, right? I'm not that worried about the level he's working in, but I am worried about the content he's getting. I'm sorry, I'm not that worried about the content, but I am worried about his pace, right? He's much further below his peers. The content he's getting is similar, so I'm going to leave that, but I'm going to adjust the goal and I'm going to bring him up to 100. It would be not be in Data Mentor. So Data Mentor will say it does not have any suggestions at the time because the teacher is not present for a cold timing, or if you turn the quiz step off, it will also not provide it. There is a way to select all. If you click the top student, the box next to the top student, hold your shift key down and click the box next to the bottom student, that will highlight all students. So that's the select all is click the top, hold the shift key down and click the bottom, and everybody in between will be highlighted. Okay, so what if Jeff was an 8th grader? Okay, all the data is the same. So he still needs a challenge. Now he has to gain even more from a rate standpoint, but he has to gain 5 years from a grade standpoint. I don't know which one is further away. They both need to increase significantly. But because he is an 8th grader in the 3rd grade level, I have a very big worry about his content and the sophistication of his vocabulary. Okay. So I would raise his level. I'd put him in 3.5. I don't have a choice. I have to be more aggressive with a student who's 5 years below grade level. All right. There is a report for sharing progress with parents. It's called the progress report. You can run it on students. It summarizes how a student has done. And so if you're on the help page and go to, running or printing progress reports for that will come up. And again, that would just be on readnaturally.com/read-live-help, I think. And then if you go to the user guide, you should be able to find out how to run that report. Okay. If you have trouble finding it, please call our tech support. They can walk you through any of those tech questions. They're great. They're in from 8 to 5 Central Time. You're going to get a human. You don't have to talk to some AI person beforehand. You'll get an actual person and they can just walk you through it. Okay. So now we're going to take a look at John. John is a student who makes too many errors to pass on the first attempt. Okay. And so we are going to take a look at whether or not he has made enough progress to make a change. But any student who makes too many errors on the first attempt is suspect, right? I don't know that I want to change anything about that. We cannot tolerate inaccuracy. So John has made very tiny amounts of progress. From a very technical standpoint, John has made progress in 2 or more areas. But a 1% increase in the cold timing score, a 1% increase in the past timing score, these are very modest increases. But the most important thing is that he's making too many errors to pass. You cannot raise a level or a goal for a student who's making too many errors to pass. You need to talk to him. You need to tell him you're going to have to lower his level. You're going to have to lower his goal if he doesn't start being more accurate. You might have to increase the number of read-alongs he does. Take a look at how he's doing it, making sure he's doing it correctly. Okay. If you're having problems with like whether or not you're doing the cold timing, if it says you're not with the student, that means that it's listed as student independent for the cold timing. So that would be under story options. So if you go under story options and make sure it's listed as teacher required, then it will not have that error message for you. Okay, so Data Mentor would say it does not have any suggestion at this time. What I want now is for you to take a look at if Jeff was really struggling on his quiz, okay? and he's making too many errors to pass. So now you have a double problem. You have a kid who's inaccurate and he's struggling with comprehension. After 12 stories, his quiz score is still low. Now you have to lower his level. And I'm going to tell you that nobody wants their level lowered, no student and no teacher. But let me make a plea to you for a moment. It is going to be better for him. Every time he answers a comprehension question correctly, he gets a happy sound, and when he answers it wrong, he gets a sad sound. That is really defeating. If he's in a little bit lower level, he's going to do better on the quiz. It's going to feel better. He's going to pass on his be more likely to pass on his first attempt and not have so many errors because the words are going to be a little easier. So he will have more success there. It will feel better. He will become more engaged. As soon as he gets over, the little injury of being bumped down, it will solve itself. When you move him back into 5.0, all those stories that he passed before will still be passed, and he'll just pick one that he didn't do. Okay. Okay. Um, So let's take a look at Janelle. She's a student who's made huge gains. So we're just going to end with Janelle because she's the student everybody wants. She's had huge progress in cold timing, huge progress in past timing. We've already raised her goal once. The difference is 10 or more. I mean, just everywhere. One thing I want to note with this example is she has 100% on average on her quiz. 100% on average on her quiz. Um, so the practices have also been cut in half. So she obviously needs more of a challenge. Now, Janelle is a case where she's only passed 12 stories and she is closer to reading at grade level. She has to double her rate and she's a year and a half below grade level. Okay, so technically she's closer to grade level. But in a normal situation, when a student's closer to grade level, I tend to be more inclined to raise a goal. But in Janelle's case, when she's making huge gains and she's getting 100% correct on the quiz on average, not just once, but average of the most recent 3, that tells me something about content. And so in this case, I would raise Janelle's level. Okay. And Data Mentor would tell you to raise Janelle's level also. Okay. So it will say, that the new level should be 3.0. You can manually make the change. And this is available both in the student and staff module, but you can also just click that accept button and change the level from 2.5 to 3.0. Okay. So that sums up keeping students challenged for today. We have our help page. You can see in the lower right corner, that is our help page website, readnaturally.com/, I said it right, read-live-help. Go there. We have lots of videos, tutorials. We have a Smart Start Guide, a user guide, lots of good help. But please do not hesitate to call us. That's why we're here. We have wonderful resources right in our website. So here's our phone number and our email. If you have a question that hasn't been answered, we're already over time. So if you have a question that hasn't been answered, please, you can put it in your survey that will appear when the session ends. So complete that survey and you can ask questions in there. Otherwise, feel free to call or email us. We're always happy to help that way as well. Thank you all for your attention and have a wonderful day.